Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday morning. I hope everybody survived the holiday with the old fam bam. I am Barrett. Laurie, if you are new here, I am not only fabulous, I am your host for today and always. Today, I am so excited to have Addey Vaters with me from Borrowed Solace. And we are going to get deep into that discussion here in just a second. But first, for those of you that are new, let me let you know about the format. So here's what we do. We are going to open up with the first half of the discussion being all about me, my time, my questions. Although I want to hear from you. So give me some information in the chat box. Let me know the questions you want to ask Addey, and I will pull them up a little later in the live chat section. We will get to the middle and we will do a rapid fire question section, which is just short answers. And you guys can chat along in the chat with your answers. You know I love to hear what you have to say about it. But bring those questions for Addey and all about the Borrowed Solace podcast and literary journal, because we will be holding nothing back. So let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Addey Vaters loves anything and everything related to cats and or folk music and is a proponent of the Oxford comma, which is a hot topic around here, and I'm here for it. She resides in sunny, sometimes snowy Colorado, and her work has been published in Riverrun, Sleet Magazine, Black Dog Review, and Vita Brevis, among others. Addey is the voice behind Borrowed Solace, the podcast, and is always looking for contributors to be featured on the show. She admires jovial poetry that plays with language, even when the subject may be more somber. Addey is also about to jump into the query trenches, so we will definitely be getting into that upcoming query journey. With that, it is my great pleasure to welcome Addey. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am really good because you are here with me. So take it away. I'm going to give you a second to tell everybody all about where they can connect with you.
Perfect. Thanks so much for having me, first of all. Like Barrett said, my name is Addey Vaters. Yes, pronounced like Darth Vader. I'm the poetry editor for Borrowed Solace, which our tagline for the journal is a journal of literary ramblings. And I am also the host of Borrowed Solace, the podcast. I'm also a writer, so I understand both the editor side and the writer side of things when it comes to submitting and being in that process with the literary journal. So you can find me all over the interwebs. First of all, our website for the journal is just borrowedsolace.com, and you can follow us on social media everywhere, just at Borrowed Solace. And then my personal website is addeyvaters.com. And I have a Substack newsletter called Noteworthy that you can subscribe to on my website if you are interested and want to check that out. I also write for Medium at Addey Vaters, and then again, social media everywhere is just at Addey Vaters.
Love it. Welcome. I'm so glad to have you. I will give folks away. We met because I did your podcast. So that was our first connection. So we will give that little secret away.
Yeah.
But I had such a good time. I kind of was that person who followed up and said, hey, any chance I can sneak you over on our show? So here we are. So let's dive in. I can't wait to talk about all of the things. So Addey, do you remember the first story that you wrote and shared with someone? And what was it about?
Sure. So I don't remember a particular story, but I do remember I was homeschooled through elementary school. And my mom would always give my sister and I creative writing prompts every Friday. That was our creative writing day. And so I remember writing a lot of those really kooky prompts. They had, we'd be given 5 words and had to put them into a story, things like that. So those are kind of my first memories of
I
creative
love that.
writing.
That's so fun. Like, I love that. Was she like was she a writer herself, or what made that something that she wanted you guys to focus on? I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I come from just a really creative family. So my mom's not a writer. My dad's a songwriter though, and musician. My parents met through singing. So I just come from a very creative background. And so they've always been like really nurturing of our creative endeavors. So.
Oh, I love that. Welcome, Devin. Good to see you. Welcome from Canada. I had to show you this one. Addey, I just followed you on Instagram and your cats have melted my heart.
Yes, I have to say too, if you like cats, follow me on TikTok. That's where I post all my cat videos. So I haven't ventured too much into writing on there, but there's a lot of cat videos if you like cats.
We love the cats here. So, oh, Richard, I'm not laughing today. That's not happening. But we do love the cats here for sure. So, talk to me about the first book that you read that turned you into a reader.
Yeah, so similar to the last question, I don't necessarily have a particular book, but I do have a couple book series. that I really got hooked on at a young age. So the first series is The Babysitter's Club by Anne M. Martin. So if you're an 80s or 90s kid, you're probably familiar with that series or at least have heard of it. Yeah. And so there's like hundreds of books, and I'm
Oh, I
pretty
know.
sure I read most of them. That was one of my favorite first series that I started reading. And then there's another series too that I thought of with this question, and it's the Elsie Dinsmore series, which may not be as familiar to people. It's actually a really old series that was written in like the 1800s by Martha Finley, I believe, is the author.
Okay.
And I ended up reading they did a like re-release of some of the books. It again I think has like 100 books or something, so I didn't read all of them. There was like a re-release with about 10 books, but that really got me hooked on like more historical reading, because that's a genre I know and love now, is a
I am
historical
gonna
romance.
I'm
So
gonna have to check that out. That I've never heard of that. That's cool though.
yeah.
And I have several historical. Rachel Terry is one of them. Historical folks in here in the chat today, so we'll have to kind of turn them onto that. That's an interesting series. Babysitter's Club for sure, and even like Boxcar Children. So that really shows my age because that was the other like 400 book series that I had way too many of the books of.
No, I never really got into Boxcar Children, but my sister was really into that. So I've
Yeah.
seen a lot of the books and know what that's about. But
Yeah. It was the classic, like the kids don't need parents. They'll just live in a train
right,
car with themselves. It's fine. We'll all be fine.
it's okay.
Um, fellow Coloradoan here, Maggie. Welcome, Maggie. Glad to see you. Good to have you. Joa, Sweet Valley High. That was another one that I loved. Yes, and this is showing our 80s baby roots there,
There
Joa.
was that.
Just so we're clear, it's giving away our age. Um, so now, what would you say? Is there a person in your life that encouraged you to write, or that saw your talent and said you need to make this your life's work?
Yeah, so I mean, I already briefly mentioned my parents, and
Yep.
they were both definitely, um, an integral part of just nurturing that creative side of everything and really encouraging me to write.
Mhm.
But I also had a few teachers throughout the years for sure who also kind of played that role as well in my life. In particular, I always remember my eighth grade teacher. Her name was Mrs. Leek. And she just really encouraged me to kind of lean into writing since it was something that I liked, something I enjoyed. She was my language arts teacher. So she kind of identified that me and a few other people in the class were just really into it. We liked that class and we did
Yeah.
well and got good grades and all of that. And she just really encouraged me to pursue that. Like, don't shy away from it. You're good at it. Like, lean into it and go for it. So I
Yes.
really always think of her when I think of this question.
I love that. I love that it's a teacher. Same for me. I had a teacher that said, and it wasn't necessarily writing. What she said to me is you're a storyteller, and she
Mm.
said whatever you do in your life, you need to tell stories because it's what you do well. And what she actually said is you don't do much else that great. So, and I was like, yeah.
That's one way to put it.
I was like, you ain't wrong, Miss Thompson. You ain't wrong. Um, So Shannon said she just followed you on Insta, also a writer and fellow
Thank
cat
you.
lover. So she will definitely be a new follower. I followed you on all the things as well.
Thank
Oh, I loved the Choose Your Own Adventure books too, Devin. That was something I loved as well.
Those are
Christopher Pike and Lois Duncan for me. Okay. I gotta get in there and check out some of these books. I'm learning all of the things. So,
yeah.
what sorts of stories do you write? Genre, category?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on what I'm writing as far as like if it's a short story or like a full length book. So I tend to lean towards more like literary fiction when I'm writing short stories. Um, that's kind of, I think, that dates back to when I was in college, because that was definitely what we were encouraged to do in all of my college classes was do literary fiction. And so I enjoy exploring different themes and things like that in short stories with literary fiction. But then when it comes to writing like a full length novel, then I have written primarily in romance. I've tried other genres, but I can never finish. Like I have a lot of, I have a graveyard of half finished books that are, like
Yeah.
YA or fantasy or whatever. Romance is where I can seem to actually be able to like finish a book and have a really thorough plot that
Yeah.
plays out. So
I love that. Is romance something that you love in other areas of entertainment? Like, are you drawn to romantic movies and or like romantic fiction podcasts, things like that, where it's all kind of, is that something you're drawn to in general?
In general, yes. Like this this time of year is my favorite because of all the Hallmark movies.
Yeah. I
So
know,
I'm
I know.
super excited. My parents are into it too, so we all watch them together.
Same.
Uh, so I love all of the
Same.
romance, anything basically.
Same. I love this question from Just Eva. Creative nonfiction. Do you dabble?
I do, yeah, a little bit. That's again something that kind of came from when I was in college because I took some creative nonfiction classes. So I have written a little bit of that as well.
Cool. Yes, Adam, on Goosebumps, 100%. If you liked Goosebumps, our friend Laura Nettles here on AuthorTube is writing spooky stories that are very much in the R.L. Stein vein in middle grade, so watch for that. And yes, Richard, that is proper literature. So just so we're clear, I'm not sure creative nonfiction is. It is, Richard, it is. What sorts of stories do you like to read? We kind of asked that, but are you drawn to romantic, like rom-coms?
Yeah, so I definitely like romance as a genre. I read a lot of historical romance. That's probably like 90% of what I read. But I do like to venture out and read different genres, especially if I get recommendations from friends or other authors.
Sure.
So yeah, contemporary romance, or historical romance. Historical romance is where it's at for me. But anything romantic, really. And then I've never really gotten into fantasy. I know a lot of people love fantasy, but I don't know, it never draws me compared to the other genres, although I am always open to good fantasy recommendations if anyone wants to try to convince me otherwise.
I mean, I'm all kidlit fantasy, but I will definitely help you out there. Thank you, Devin, for dropping Laura's channel. I appreciate you doing that. And this question from Tammy is an interesting one. I'm just going to toss it up real quick. Have you brought any cats into your work so far? Have you done any work that's about your love of kitties, whether creative
Yeah.
or
Well,
not?
when I write on Medium, I have written about cats. Some articles about cats because they have different publications on there, all about owning pets and things like that. So I've definitely written that. My novel that I'm currently querying also has a cat in it, and it has dogs. I put pets in everything because I just love pets. Um, so yes, it is. There are cats in what I write, or I'm writing about cats, depending
Yeah.
on the form.
I love that. Gary Thomas, I'm so glad you're here. Gary and I just had an interview on Friday. Gary has written a lovely memoir, but one of the things I want you to hear when we talk about it, Gary, is on the podcast and the Literary Journal, they do accept some creative nonfiction stories like yours. So I definitely want you to not miss that portion of the interview, so hang with us. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. What was the last book that you read that you loved enough to recommend to somebody else?
So, I love the Outlander series by Diana Gabaldon. I realize I've been saying her last name incorrectly for a while, so I think that's correct. But I really got hooked on that series. Like I was late to the party, so I got hooked on that series like right before the pandemic. I checked out the first book from the library, and then I had it for like 6-7 weeks because everything got shut down. But I've read all of them, and I always recommend that to people because it's really good if you're not necessarily into historical romance as much as I am, as because it has so many different elements because it has the time travel and the romance and different time periods and all of that. So I always recommend that, and I'm always trying to get my fellow editors at Borrowed Solace to read it so that we can talk about it because they have not read it yet. I'm trying to convince them, but
I
that
mean,
would be what I would recommend.
my mom sucked me in with the show. So it was that for me, I didn't know anything about it. She sucked me in with the show first. And then, of course, I was like, wait, there's books. And
Right.
so then I went and read and same, got totally sucked in, like late to the party. Everybody else was all about it. And I was like, okay, I'm finally here. And y'all are right. It's good. Devin says, my first published story is about cats. Love it and would love to
Nice.
see it. Devin, if you want to drop a link for me, I'm going to go read it. I liked this comment. I wanted to just read it real quickly. St. Houston Shannon says, my first published piece was a creative nonfiction, told the story of returning from deployment and my 3-year-old son didn't remember me and wouldn't let me touch him. That is probably a story that would have had me in tears, but would have been uplifting. So in the end, so when to get to that portion regarding submission, Q, restrictions on mature language, themes, and content. So I guess we can ask that now, or I can save it. Which do you prefer?
We can tackle that now, sure.
Let's tackle it. What are your feelings?
Yeah, so it is kind of editor specific depending on what you're submitting. So I'm the poetry editor. I don't mind like some language, but I think all of our editors would agree, and I think that's how we phrased it on our submission guidelines, is that any mature language, themes, or content kind of has to have a purpose.
Yeah.
We don't want it to just be
Gratuitous.
gratuitously there for the sake of shock, that sort of thing. So if it serves a purpose, then I think it's definitely something worth submitting to us to kind of see what the editor for whatever genre you're submitting in thinks.
Sure. Okay. So basically, it's the idea is go ahead and submit, and worst case, it's a no, which is kind of how it goes with
Pretty much, yeah.
So, yeah.
Right.
Like,
How it is with everything.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. Well, it has become that time. We're going to switch over to Borrowed Solace and get into the nitty gritty here. So let's do this. Can you tell us the origin of Borrowed Solace?
Of course. Yeah, so Borrowed Solace started when I and the other editors were all in college. We all went to the same school. And we started a writing club at our university. There kind of shockingly was not a writing club, so we went ahead and started one. And despite all of our attempts to get more members to join the club, it kind of just stayed us editors with a few extra people every now and then. And so we met every week to discuss writing and workshop each other's stories, all sorts of things like that. We went to different club fairs and conferences and all sorts of things. It was really fun. But then when graduation rolled around, we kind of started brainstorming ideas of how to keep our little group together and keep just being immersed in literature and reading and writing and all of that. So we decided to start a literary journal, and everyone liked that idea. So that's how we started it. And then it just took off from there, and it's been expanding, and we've had a bigger community, more writers who have contributed. We've had different editors come in and out depending on, different life stages, things like that. And that's how we got here.
I love that. So it's really born out of the friendship that you all built together through writing and reading, or reading and writing, loving that art form.
Yeah, the other editors and we originally were 5 editors, I think, when we founded it, and we're now 3 just because different people have moved on or whatever. But yeah, all the editors who started it are definitely like my writing tribe. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing. I love that. That's similar to probably what you're building with your podcast listeners, that similar kind of sense of community and connection. And then definitely the same thing we have here on the tubes. So let me ask you this. As far as getting the literary journal like up and going, and this wasn't one of the ones I outlined you, so if you need to sideline this question, let me know. But what was the toughest part, or what was your biggest obstacle for you guys, like getting it up and running?
I think a lot of it is like the technical side of things, kind of. So like, first of all, just getting the word out was really hard. We've kind of figured out a good balance there and figured out resources to get the word out when we're open for submissions. But that's always a struggle. I think that's a struggle for any like small press or any author, anybody. So that was hard. And then like really getting into like the nitty gritty technical stuff, like opening a bank account for the journal was kind of hard.
Yeah.
Which is random and you wouldn't think about, but we were like, we do not want to be running this out of one of our bank accounts. So like figuring that stuff out is also really tricky.
Yes.
Figured it out, but it took a while.
Yeah. Well, the MBA in me is like, like thinking of like, oh yeah, you'd probably want an LLC, you'd probably want some protection. Makes sense.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yes.
Good to see you, Sarah. I hope your nano's going well. I've missed some of the vlogs from the truck. I need to get back over on your channel. November's been insane. So let me ask you this: as far as the literary journal side, what are you looking for in terms of your submissions, and are they focused depending on the issue?
Yes, so we accept short fiction, creative nonfiction, poetry, and then we are also always looking for art and photography to feature as well for like our covers and art within the journal. So that's like the basic of what we're looking for. And then for poetry specifically, like I'm always looking for like kind of quirky poems. I love poems because they do things that fiction can't, like in regards to playing with language and things. So I personally am not a big fan of prose poetry. We recommend if you write prose poetry, submit that as flash fiction or nonfiction, depending on the content, because we might still publish it, just not necessarily as poetry. And so that's kind of specific for poetry. And then it does vary a little bit depending on the editor for that particular genre. But otherwise, there is some information on our website. We did specific blog posts by each of the editors they're called the 411 on poetry or 411 on fiction. So you can find those on our submission guidelines if you're looking for more information.
And I have linked below your most recent request and push for submissions, which is open on December 3rd or closed on December 3rd?
Open on December 3rd. So we're currently closed. We will be opening on December 3rd. So
Perfect. So the link for that, everyone, is in the description box below, and it is under submission update right next to it. And that will take you to the article or the blog post where they've kind of let you all know what they're looking for, when they're looking for it, and how you do the things. So the college professor in me is telling you, go to that link and read read the syllabus,
yeah.
Let me ask you this. You said something behind the scenes that I kind of want you to say again here, just because I think it was an interesting point. And we have lots of folks that write poetry here in the community.
Sure.
You said something about using prose in poetry as sort of a backdoor way to get around the rules a little bit. Can you go into that one more time? Just
Yeah.
I think it's good from where you sit to explain that so that someone's feels aren't hurt when they submit.
Yeah. Sure. So I think for literary journals in particular, we have limited space, right, in each edition. It's usually around 100 pages, which is actually kind of long for a lot of journals. But because of that, we have specific page limits for what we can publish in each category. And so poetry gets more poets who get published because they're shorter. They're usually 1 or 2 pages, whereas a fiction story can be 10 pages, and that takes up half of the fiction section. So I sometimes feel like people try to get around the acceptance rates, if you will, by kind of trying to cram a short story or creative nonfiction piece into a poem. And that they're different art forms, right? So that doesn't exactly work. I mean, it can work if you are consciously making that translation from one to the other. But sometimes I kind of feel like I run into people who almost write their own version of, the Odyssey or whatever and want us to publish it because it's a big epic story. And it's like, well, that probably would work better for fiction, even though your odds may not be as good.
Yeah.
It's a tricky balance for
Yeah.
sure, but that's just something I've noticed through the years.
This is a question on every writer's heart. As we were talking about agents behind the scenes, do you respond to all submissions? Do you let everybody know it's a no if it's a no?
We do. So we use a submissions manager. It's called Green Submissions. So you create an account in there, and we do update everything to let everyone know whether they are accepted or not. It should send you an email notification as well, but you can always log in and check the status too. So we do make an effort to let everybody know. That's why we don't do email submissions, because they slip through the cracks so easily. So that's why we funnel everything through Green Submissions so you can get an answer.
Yeah, I may sneak in and figure out that Green Submissions thing for our critique group live submissions, because I'm trying to figure out a way to clean up my inbox.
Yeah, it's free too, which is really nice.
Oh, well, that's even better.
Yeah.
Do you prefer non-published authors or established authors for submissions?
We honestly have no preference. Work does need to be previously unpublished, but it doesn't matter if you've had 50 short stories published or have never published a short story before. We do not take that into consideration when we're looking at your work.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, it looks like CB and Richard are trying to get around the Word situation. And Richard said download Google Docs as a Word doc might be a way around that if Word is your barrier. And yes, Lauren, you were one of the poets I was thinking of, you and your sister, when I was thinking of folks who write poetry and should probably think about submitting. What would you say is the toughest part of your specific job as an editor doing poetry for the journal? What's the toughest part of that? Is it the saying no? Is it turning someone down?
I think it probably is, because it's really sometimes it's down to the wire, you know? There's 2 poems that I love, and it's trying to figure out how if we can accept them both, if there's perhaps extra room in for poetry because there's less nonfiction. Um, so it's kind of trying to find that balance, and it's really hard because sometimes poems that would are really good don't end up getting published, but
Yeah.
there's only so many we can accept, so it's
Yeah.
really hard sometimes, and it's a little sad.
Yeah. Yeah. So now what about the name Borrowed Solace? Who came up with it? Where did the idea come from?
Yes, so I will say, first of all, picking a name is super, super hard. We had a ton of ideas, but we were, they were already taken by another literary journal or by a company overseas or something really random like that. So it was really hard to pick a name. Um, and we finally settled on Borrowed Solace, and it has a couple meanings. So it kind of has a funny meaning. I'll explain that first. So the other editors in particular, not me so much, although it is really funny now explaining it to people. They really wanted like the acronym to mean something. So clearly, Borrowed Solace.
That's long. That's a big acronym.
Well, no, I mean like BS.
Oh, oh.
So, so yeah, they thought that was really funny because we were kind of just BSing it and coming up with everything as we went along. Still are sometimes, not gonna lie. So that's the funny version of the name story. But then obviously there is a more sincere meaning. We didn't just choose those words only because of that. Um, so we loved the idea of the journal kind of bringing solace to those who read its pages.
Yeah,
So, right, we all live super crazy, hectic, busy lives. And we loved the idea of our journal bringing like a moment of borrowed solace to your day.
sure.
Um, Even if there's no other solace in your day, you can borrow some for a minute by reading our journal. And in theory, I mean, it is 100 pages, usually, the journal, give or take. But the idea is that you would be able to kind of sit down and read the whole thing in one sitting if you really wanted to in a few hours.
Yeah,
Because not every page is, full of words.
right.
So
Well, and I
that's
bought
the idea.
Corruption, was the one I bought,
Mhm.
and I wanna say I finished it in about an hour and 45 minutes, or so, because there was some picture like you said, it's
Mhm.
not all stories and poetry and stuff, so there's a lot there.
Right. We try to make it visually appealing, and so because of that, there's heading pages, and we have introductory pages, all of that sort of thing. So,
Yeah. I love this question, I'm just gonna toss it real quick. Can you describe your target readers for the journal?
yeah, I mean, to put it like very broadly, I think just anyone who loves the written word. So, we really love words. Our executive editor, Nicole McConnell, she kind of came up with the tagline that's on our social media that looks like we're building a legion of words, to kind of bring solace to everybody. So I don't know if we necessarily have like readers of a specific genre or age group or other demographic who would like the journal, just anyone who loves to read and loves the written word. And we use writing as art pretty much.
Yeah, agreed. I like I said, I was very impressed with Corruption, and on price, very reasonable too. I wanna say it was $7 or 7.50,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
really reasonable for what I mean, I paid definitely more than that for some of my friends being published in other literary journals for sure, so
Yeah.
price-wise, I thought it was great too. Love this question as well. Best advice for someone that might want to start a literary journal for themselves?
Sure. Um, I think probably the biggest piece of advice is really figure out how you're going to uh, trying to think this through. Figure out how you're going to like build up your community. So we have the podcast. A lot of literary journals don't have that. And maybe you
Yeah,
want to do something unique like that. Maybe you want to have a YouTube channel for your literary journal or a blog or all three. You can do anything like that. But I think if you really want to get those really devoted like fans or followers of the journal, and in return get amazing work to publish from those same people, then really thinking about like how you can kind of corner in on the market, I guess, for your journal, whether, like I said, that can be something unique, like a podcast or YouTube or whatever that might be.
Yeah. Well, and I think for folks here, especially Lauren, what that explanation made me think of is when I was talking to specifically you, Lauren, about using our YouTube channels as a community builder, right? That if you can toss up an I'm going live without a lot of, prep and letting people know, and you can get 10, 15 people to show up for you, that is your folks. Those are your folks that are probably going to read your literary journal, and that's where you start, and then let them help you grow it, right? As you go. So you had a couple other questions I'm going to toss up real quick before I get back on track with mine. Do we know the theme of the next themed issue?
Not yet. That won't be until fall 2022. So we don't have that nailed down yet.
Got it. And this one, expanding on target readers. Do you seek out or omit pieces that touch on controversial issues? Are there any terms or focuses included or excluded surrounding faiths or certain politics or humanitarian issues?
I think we tend to steer away from politics, either side of the aisle. But other than that, we don't really exclude anything just because it covers a certain topic.
Yeah. And probably with politics, are you meaning more like opinion pieces or like
Yeah, like I know when COVID first happened, we were kind of surprised. We got a lot of stories and poems about COVID, which we were not expecting. And we were
I guess it makes sense if you're.
why everyone writing about this? I don't know.
I guess if you're at home and you have nothing to.
But like that's not a direct, like we're not going to reject it just because it's about COVID, but if it's about whether it's real or not, or if they're, when it gets into like stuff like that, that's where we're like, we just don't want to get into it.
Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. That's perfect. So now, this is what I purchased Corruption. I loved it. So the themes that you do come up with, do you wait until you receive the submissions and then you guys kind of determine what the theme will be based on those? Or is the theme something you determine in advance?
Usually we determine it in advance. But sometimes that will be influenced by either like previous submissions that we've received. That's really it's almost always in advance unless it's influenced by previous submissions. We don't really open up submissions and then determine it based off of those submissions, if that makes sense.
Totally. Let's switch gears to the podcast. Where did the idea for the podcast come from?
Yeah, so the podcast, it was my idea originally. I am like a super avid podcast listener. I love podcasts. Like starting all the way back with like the first season of Serial. That's one of the first podcasts that like I got really, really into and kind of got me started with that. So since then I've listened to like a ton of podcasts on a variety of topics, writing, religion, whatever. I just love listening to podcasts. So I kind of got the idea that we could start a podcast and feature people who have been published in the journal or just like other creatives. We talk to a lot of people who have been published in the journal, but also people who have not been published in the journal or who have, creative platforms like you, Barrett, with YouTube, or even people who aren't writers but do something creative with, songwriting or videos or whatever it might be. And I kind of got the other editors on board with the podcast with the caveat that like I'd be the host and I would do all the all the work kind of because they were a little wary of being online and things like that. A lot of people are, and I totally understand that. And I was too when we first started. I didn't know what I was doing, so it's a little nerve-wracking. But since our first season started, I think that was back in 2019 now or 2018. I lose track. But yeah, we've definitely improved the podcast in, quality and our confidence with the podcast, and the other editors have kind of come around and I think they enjoy it just as much as I do. So
I love to hear it. I love to hear it. I love to hear. I always think it's great when a brand moves into some sort of long form content, whether it's video or podcast, but some way where your folks reading, especially, can get to know someone behind the thing they love more intimately.
Mhm.
And even if that's not like what we think of as intimacy, but just to know you, feel like they know you as a person a little more, through what interests you, what kind of guests do you want to have on, that kind of thing, that I think builds that connection with your audience. So I love that. I think it's a really smart move for you guys, and differentiates you from lots of other literary journals. I agree with that. I'm going to ask this one real quick before I go back to the podcast questions. Are pieces by the editors included in each issue?
So we write like introductions to each of our sections, but that's pretty much all. I think the only the very first issue we included any pieces by us, and that was because we didn't have enough to fill up the pages.
Yeah.
But since then, it's really just introductions to each section and things like that.
What has been the best part of having the podcast?
So I think that the best part has just been like having the space to talk to people about lots of interesting topics in the writing world. I am the type of person who can like easily bore my friends and family with just like going on and on and on about different writing things. I love it so much. Like I could just talk about it forever. So having the podcast where I can bring other people who are like that onto the show, and we can just like for an hour or an hour and a half. We don't really have a time limit, so it
Yeah.
can vary depending on the episode. But having like that space to just talk about all the writer things and kind of like refill our collective like writing tanks is really nice.
Well, and to be able to talk to other people that know the feel your pain,
Yeah,
right? Especially if you're going
exactly.
through querying or something, it's like, oh, they get it.
Right.
You said something before we went live about checking your email all the time. That is
Yep.
truly something people that don't do traditional publishing get. Like they just don't
Right.
get it. You're like, wait a minute, what do you mean you like broke your email on your phone? Well, because I was refreshing it so much it froze and I had to reset the whole phone.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense to people who haven't been there and done it.
Yes, exactly.
Um, I love this question. Maggie Penumbra Ward asks, what do you think about the revival of serialized fiction through free or paid reading apps and the newer Kindle Vella app? Any feelings on that?
I mean, I personally think it's really cool. I
I do
think
too.
it's a really unique way to bring a fiction, a full-length fiction novel to a different audience kind of, and do it differently. And I love the fact that like we're going back to some like writerly roots, with like how Charles Dickens used to publish his
Yeah,
books, things like that. So I love it.
me too. Me too. I think it opens new opportunities. And I'm a big fan. And Maggie, if you haven't checked some of them out, there's some really, really great ones, especially in the LGBTQ side storytelling. But fictionalized podcasts that
Yeah.
are lovely. So many that I loved that were great. Look Up is the one from last year that I'm obsessed with. That was about two boys where their moms are astronauts and they fall in love, and it's a romance story. So if you love romance, great 10-episode podcast that you can get sucked into like I did. Um, so as far as the podcast goes, here's a question for you. So let's say we have a writer that's interested in reaching out to you guys to pitch you an idea. What's the best way to go about that? Or what's the best practices, I guess,
Mhm.
for how to reach out?
Yeah, so we do have an email specifically for the podcast. Unlike with the journal submissions, podcast submissions are okay in email. So podcast@borrowedsolace.com. And so if you are interested in like coming on the podcast to talk about your book, or if you have a YouTube channel or whatever that might be, we'd love to hear from you and potentially set something up. And then if you're interested in having like a short piece of fiction or nonfiction or several poems, because they're really short, so we don't want too short of an episode.
Sure.
If you're interested in having those read on the show, then you can email us there as well. And we take submissions both from people who have already been published in the journal and people who have not. So we'll consider whatever you send along. And then either you can read it on the podcast if you're accepted, or one of us editors can read it if you're not feeling that.
Yeah, and we get that here all the time too. So everybody gets that. Everybody's comfort level is different
Yeah,
when it comes to the interwebs. Just Eva asks, what are your long-term goals with the journal and with the podcast?
sure. Um, I mean, we would love the podcast to, reach more ears. continue to develop the community that we have there and keep going, and eventually maybe have advertisers and expand and all of that. That is a pipe dream down the road ways. But we would love that for the podcast. And then for the journal, honestly, to just kind of keep doing what we're doing. Expand, again, the community. We really are lucky to have really great people who have been published in the journal and who are submitting and who support us. And so it's a small group right now, and we are so grateful for them, and just continuing to add to that community is really, I think, all of our goals. So
I love that. I'll never look at Borrowed Solace the same since people are now shortening it to BS. Do you anticipate adding anthologies of past submissions and or with new submissions to the BS lineup?
Yeah, that is something that we have talked about. We had our very first inaugural edition of the journal. We had in a print version come out over the summer, and we have talked about doing like a best of the year or best of 2 years, however that would play out, since we only have 2 issues a year. So we have thought about doing that. Print is just hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of upfront cost,
money,
even with the print on demand and everything. So I totally understand why authors love having their writing in print. I love it too, but it's just hard. So we may do something digital with like anthologies or print, but it's something we would love to do for sure, and that we've tossed around.
Cool. Love it. Eva said, Stephen King originally published The Green Mile as a serial as well, 6 novellas, one at a time. Didn't know that. That's very interesting. Telling people to reach out. Devin dropped the link. I am so appreciative,
Nice.
Devin. Where would I be without you? Penumbra MM Ward Maggie says, do you think the ease that Kindle brought to self-publishing has hurt your submission base? Great question. You guys are going to take my gig.
I know. I'm like, these are questions I have not thought about a whole lot.
Yeah.
I think that the Kindle self-publishing is kind of a different demographic than like people who are submitting to us, at least if that's what you're referring to. I know, well, we'll talk to both sides of it, I guess.
Yeah.
But as far as people submitting, people publishing and submitting, self-publishing through Kindle is different than with us, I think, for a lot of people, because a lot of people publish with a journal first and then collect all their poetry or short works into one volume, and that's pretty standard, whether it's traditionally published or self-published. So I don't think it's really affected that side of things. As far as like the consumer, like the person who buys the journal or something from Kindle, I don't know if that's really affected it a lot. I don't know. I think the journal is, again, different than a lot of what is published and sold through Kindle, but that's an interesting thought, and it's not something I've looked into a whole lot. So that would be interesting to investigate further.
Yeah. This is a similar question, so I'm going to toss it up, but I think you kind of answered it, which is, do you think the ease that Kindle, Wattpad, Radish, Royal Road, and such apps brought to self-publishing has hurt the submission base? But again, I think you kind of answered that in the last one. So yeah, I mean, I think with everything, the more stuff there is that you can divide your pie into how a reader spends their day, the less time they're going to have for any other slice of that pie in general, probably, is true. I would consider being accepted and published under BS's umbrella to be a small press published, which can fall under self or traditional published, depending on the author that's discussing it. I mean, yeah, I guess I would have assumed you guys were probably a small press, right?
I think technically, I don't know if we would classify ourselves as that necessarily, but I think in the like different categories of publishing avenues, that would probably be the closest to what we are.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's switch over to you. Let's talk all about you. We've covered the journal, we've covered the podcast, but now all the heat's on you. So tell us all about your querying, or you queried earlier in the year. You're going to go back out in the spring. So talk to us about that book. If you want to give us your pitch, toss it out there, and then tell us about your query journey.
Yeah, sure. So I did start querying. Well, first of all, the book that I wrote, I finished kind of in the earlier this year. I finished, started it like fall of last year, finished it earlier this year and then went through edits and all of that. With the goal of, I actually went to a writing conference online, of course, in April, and I had a pitch. So my goal is to kind of get everything ready to go by then. And my book is a sweet romance novel. So if you're familiar with the romance genre, then you know that there are varying levels of heat or steaminess, however you want to describe it, in each different subgenre of romance, basically. And mine is a sweet romance, which is basically like a Hallmark movie in book form.
Mild.
Yeah. So it's a contemporary romance with some historical elements. And that's because most of the book takes place in a historical Western town that was turned like a Wild West amusement park. And of course ends with a happily ever after. But yeah, so I got that all finished and ready to go for my pitch in April. And so that was kind of the start of my querying then. And it picked up a lot in the fall. And then I've kind of taken a break right now since the holidays are approaching. And depending on what advice you're listening to, it's not necessarily the best time to query because just you won't hear back probably.
December is a dead month. Yeah.
So I'm just kind of leaving what I've got out there.
Yeah.
Hoping for good news.
Yeah.
Then kind of looking to revamp my querying process in the new year.
Love that. So talking about your book and your sweet story, well, let's talk about the spice level. Would you ever up the spice level, or are you very happy in the sweet lane?
That's more what I like to read. Having said I love Outlander though. So there's a spectrum, but most of what I read, I tend to go with Hallmark movie type stories. That's the best way I can describe it, PG. And that's what I like to read. So that's kind of what I decided to write. Although, as I said, I love Outlander. So, I mean, I'm open to anything, but it varies. But for me writing, I think I'll probably end up sticking with sweet, at least for now.
Yeah. This question, again, feel free to not answer it if you don't want to. How many queries have you sent and how many responses have you received? But if you don't want to answer, just say don't answer.
Yeah, I think I've sent like 20 or 25 queries. I do keep track, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay.
And I've gotten, I think, like 10 to 15 responses back. The majority of which are rejections, which, that's how it is when you're querying. I've had better luck with like pitch events and things, which I kind of count as querying, even though it's not a traditional query.
Yes.
So yeah, I've had better luck with pitch events. But I think, I don't know the exact number of acceptances versus rejections off the top of my head.
That's okay. Again, that wasn't a planned question. So,
and I'm happy to share that information. I just don't remember it.
No, that's okay. And I do, obviously, I am too. I've definitely talked about it. Let me just throw this out there because you kind of hit on it, and I want to stress that because I've done several videos. I totally agree on I think sometimes the pitching is when I talk to people about my query experience, and I queried so few people and I had a big response rate. However, they were primed for me. 2 or 3 of those agents I had connected with through PitMad and LGBT Pit. So you know what I mean? Like they were ready for those submissions. So I always say to people, having a primed person ready for your query, or even if it's just a like that you can point to, like, hey, you liked my pitch on PitMad 3 weeks ago, here's my query. You're already going to have a little bit of a level up from someone who's just cold querying someone. And maybe that's all in my head, but just from my experience helping folks with online pitch contests like Twitter contests, at least that's been my experience. Most of those folks that are expecting your query will at least ask for a partial because they've already been interested in your pitch. So yeah, so I agree with you. I would say anybody could do, whether you can do it in person at a conference, a pitch event, awesome, because you're getting an even more personal connection that way, which I think is always a winner. But do not shy away from the Twitter pitch contest as well. Sorry, I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I just wanted to.
No, I agree. And then I actually didn't do any Twitter pitch events. It was the pitch at the conference, and then there was Savvy Authors is what they're called. It's a website, and I did their pitch.
So how was that experience? What was that like? I've seen that. I've never done it.
It is at least previously, and the one I did in the fall was more geared toward romance, just FYI for anyone who's interested in it. So it was a lot of romance editors and then agents. And I had good results. I think I pitched to 4 people and I got 2 requests. And I'm waiting to hear back on 1 more, I think. So
Yeah.
I thought it was a really good experience and I would recommend it. So.
That's a great tip, I think, for folks. I think that's great. Thank you. Terry says, also historical fiction lover. Yeah, this time of year doesn't seem like a good time to query, but is there ever a good time? And Rachel, we feel you on that here. The most Christmassy thing I think I watch is a Coca-Cola advert. Holidays are coming. Oh, when I see the I in holidays. Richard, bless you. Love you to bits. Die Hard. Oh, look at you guys. Really, really deep with it. Die Hard and a Coca-Cola ad. Let's see. Okay, you guys are, and we're talking about Twitter. I don't know where I lost you. I lost you guys on this. All right, I know what we're talking about. So I'm going to get back on track with what we were talking about, and we'll jump back in with you. So as far as this particular story, what inspired it?
Yeah, so, well, it's based in Colorado, first of all. And it's a sort of long story, so I'll try to be brief. But I was actually on a trip with my mom, what was it, a year ago? I guess it was during the height of 2020 and all of the things that come with that. And we went to Canyon City, which is a town here in Colorado. They have the Royal Gorge there, if anyone is familiar with that, which is just a really big gorge with a really scary bridge that you can walk across. I don't like heights, so it kind of freaked me out. But on the way to Royal Gorge, there used to be a like Wild West amusement park called Buckskin Joe. And it closed down, and I didn't know that until we went to see the Royal Gorge. And I was researching what happened to it because it was somewhere that we used to take, out of town family members and things like that when I was growing up. And so I researched what happened to it. And it turns out that this Wild West amusement park, which was a movie set, they filmed like John Wayne movies there and everything. It was sold to a big investor, and he moved the whole thing to his private property in Aspen. And so that really got me thinking, because I was like, that sounds like the plot of a Hallmark movie. So
Yeah.
that kind of got me going and got me started thinking through how I could turn that real life inspiration into a fictional romance novel. And then it just kind of took off from there. I rolled with it and wrote the whole book kind of based around a fictional similar town. So
yeah, I love that. So what about the characters? Was there anybody in it that's inspired by somebody in your life, or do you pretty much keep a separation there?
I mean, there's no one who I like directly based a character off of or anything like that. But I know that all of the characters have certain elements from different people in my life. But there's no like direct correlation between any character and a person in my real life. Nothing intentional, at least.
Yeah. This question I may need some clarity from Maggie on. How do you feel about the RWA controversies in the last year? RWA is what I'm not sure about.
Romance Writers of America.
Thank you. Okay. And see, I guess I didn't need that. And do you think that the ethnic and gender diversity needs to be more respected by established publishers and writers groups? So is established publishers, is she talking big 5? Is that the assumption what we're talking about? Or Maggie, I guess, tell me in comments, is that kind of what you mean? Or just so I can understand? And I guess, do you have anything on that you can speak to? I'm not quite, I'd have to understand the question before I'd answer it. So
yeah, I'm not a member of RWA or anything, so I don't follow all that super closely, but I am familiar with some of the controversies.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't follow it, so I'm a little
yeah,
I think
that it's good that things like that are being brought up and being discussed and being noticed.
Big five. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's definitely, and I think it is hard, especially I know the controversy I can think of was around a historical fiction book. And I think that's where it gets kind of tricky for anyone. And like, as someone who loves historical fiction, that's something I want to be really cognizant of, like not writing about a certain topic or a certain time period, um, just because, like, when there's more sensitive ways and more beneficial ways to do that, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
sure.
So
Totally.
I feel like that's not much of an answer, but
No, no, I think that's good. I am a member of my local writers guild, but then the BWI, the children's book writers group. So
Mhm.
and we've had similar stuff in our group for sure.
Yeah,
And so if you were asking me that question, Maggie, I would just be saying I think they're all trying.
yeah,
I don't know with large organizations like that are so enmeshed with the major publishers, like it's going to take a little while. Like
yeah.
I think for things to equal out a little more, I think at least in the kids side, they're trying. They're trying. I mean, middle grade books like this by Alex Gino or any of his books for kids in middle grade wouldn't have been thinkable in 2010, right? So for me, that's progress. So anyway, again, we got off on not what we're supposed to be talking about. I'm getting off track. So what about, tell me this, what is your favorite trope in romance and why?
Yes, so again with historical romance, because that really is my favorite. So I really like the trope of the marriage of convenience, which I actually didn't realize that I loved this trope so much until recently. And I wrote about it in my newsletter actually, because I love talking about tropes, and there's so many in romance in particular, and everyone has their favorite. So I really like the marriage of convenience trope, which is just when a woman ends up marrying someone because she basically doesn't have any other prospects, or back in historical times when that would have been more necessary. That's why it really only works with historical romance.
Yeah.
um, but I love this trope. I really like tropes where like the two main love interests are kind of like thrust together and they have to figure it out.
Yeah.
It makes for a lot of like, hilarious moments, awkward moments.
It's
And
also very Hallmark. Like it's very
yes.
that it's like, it's very like, the baker and like the guy who owns the building that wants to get rid of the bake shop have to work it out in the end. Um,
Yeah.
Eva,
I
thank you so much for dropping her newsletter link. Yes, everyone, if you haven't
thank
subscribed
you.
to Addie's newsletter, it is there in the chat, so be sure and do that. Tyrone, welcome. We are talking about publishing. So we are into romance books at the moment and talking about the querying process. Welcome. Good to see you. And Maggie says, what romance trope would you never write? Love
Hmm.
that question.
I'm not sure. I've not really thought about that because I just think about what I want to write.
That's fair.
So
That's
I don't know if I have an answer to that one off the top of my head.
that's fair. I'm good with that one. Um, Well, let's do this. We are going to switch over because we're making just incredible time. I am going to switch to rapid fire since we're a little early to the 1 hour mark, and then I'll switch back to craft discussions in the back half when we're getting to live chat questions from the audience. So if you are ready, we're going to do a rapid fire. The idea is your first answer that pops in your head is the right one. And if you want to pass, all you have to say is pass. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Good deal. What would you say is your best virtue?
Hmm. I like I like to think I'm a good friend. I really try to be a good friend. So
Yeah, I love that one. That's a great answer. What is your latest obsession?
ooh. Oh, I am a big Swiftie, so
Ah,
Taylor Swift, Red,
yep.
Taylor's version,
Yep.
10 Minute All Too Well has been on like repeat for all of November.
Okay. Okay. I'm having my Adele feels right now, so I respect that. What is your favorite word?
Oh, I don't know if I have a favorite word.
Okay, but we'll keep going. What about a least favorite word?
Again, I don't know if I have one.
Okay, that's okay. There are no wrong answers. What would you say annoys you the most?
Uh, I don't like driving and like slow drivers. I get road rage and it's bad and I know it, but I
Same.
can't help it.
I don't drive. My husband drives 99% of the
Yes.
time for that very reason. What sin are you most likely to forgive of the seven deadly?
Hmm. Uh, is one of them? Gluttony?
It is, and that's my favorite.
Yeah, that would be the one.
Right. Well, and mine is usually the same answer for both. So for the second one, what sin are you most likely to be guilty of?
I don't know, probably the same.
Yeah, me too. It's always gluttony
Yeah,
and gluttony for me on
I
those two.
mean, having just had Thanksgiving, I mean,
Oh, exactly. I have the pie proof to tell. Let's see. What can always bring a smile to your face?
I love animals, so like cute animal videos or real life cute animals.
I
Give
love
me
that. If you had to live anywhere besides Colorado, where would you live?
hmm. I'd love to live abroad. I've always thought like Ireland or somewhere like that would be really
Mm,
cool.
yeah, for sure.
For a little while at least.
Yeah. Where are you the happiest?
I'm really a homebody, so like I'm really happy just watching a Hallmark movie with my cats and a cup of tea or something like that.
Love that. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
My first thought is mind reading, but I also think that would be really hard to have.
Yeah, I think that could be a double-edged sword.
Yeah,
If you could meet any author, dead or alive, who would you want to have dinner with?
probably Louisa May Alcott.
Hmm, love that. What trait do you admire most in your friends?
Um, I guess like steadfastness, like being there when you need them.
Yep. And what trait would you say that your friends say they admire most in you?
Hmm. Hopefully the same thing. I don't know.
100% fair. All right, rapid fire has begun. I'm going to toss up everyone else's answers. My sense of humor, Barrett, Laurie. See, I need to memorize these questions. Oh, am I the sin? Was that the sin, or am I effervescent? That is a good word.
That is good.
I know Richard well enough to know these are his least favorite words. Um, People eating loudly, smacking is one of mine. Yes, I had a thing. I had a rule in my classes that students couldn't chew gum
Oh,
because it just that was oof. Forgetfulness, yes, don't disagree. Oh, here we go. The battle begins. Pineapple on pizza and cats. Um, the Oxford comma. Oh boy, you guys are getting spicy in here.
uh,
What you're doing, and you're getting spicy. Rachel Terry says, "I'm still trying to get over the flange." I know we all are. That's one of those. Get out of here, Richard. Um, Power to stop time. Obviously, I've always wanted that one too.
that one's cool.
That one is very, very cool. And this one, yes, 100%. Maya
Mm,
Angelou, yes, that is one I would
that
love.
one.
P.S. I Love You was set in Ireland, I think. Yes, it
That,
was. I loved that one.
that was a good one.
Um, Question 12. I got two questions there, Richard. I'm going to have to go back and see what they were. Loyalty, yes. Compassion, yes. And I love these answers, probably loyalty too. Agreed, agreed, agreed. So that was our rapid fire. We are now getting into questions. It is all about you guys. Ask anything you want. Within reason, of course. If you get naughty, I'm going to have the mods bounce you. But ask any questions within reason and go for it. Until then, I am going to circle back to craft and ask you a couple of craft discussions questions that I did not get to. So,
Okay.
do you have a craft book that you swear by, or that is like your holy grail of writing?
So I don't really have a particular book that I like swear by or anything. I've read a lot, but I know so many people like love Save the Cat or whatever and will like swear by it, but I've never really adhered to that. But I will say like craft advice, like I really like the advice to like edit out filler words. That's been super helpful for me, which is more like editing advice, not like while you're crafting the story, but um, I found it really helpful to edit out words like that, had, and was when I was editing my book. So I like that advice.
Well, and let me ask you this because that is a weakness of mine. So tell me this: why are those words? Why are they holding us back?
So I know, like for me, I when I'm drafting, I just want to get it on the page.
Yeah.
And so I often resort to using words like that to get the words out.
Yeah.
And so it really helped me like identify spots where I needed to, or I guess I didn't need to, but I wanted to, like
Yeah.
clean up my writing and strengthen my language. Um, but those words aren't like inherently bad in and of themselves. I didn't
Right.
get rid of all of them,
Right.
but I could reduce it quite a bit, and it helped me pinpoint areas where I could use different wording that would be much stronger and elicit a better response from the reader, better imagery, things like that.
Do you find that those for filler words is something I'm struggling with? Eva, who did some master work on my manuscript that I queried last year, definitely had some feels on the filter words that I have problems with, and bless her for doing that. I love her for it.
Yeah.
But the thing I learned, I think, from like her feedback, for example, was you're right. You can't get rid of all of them. But what I saw was happening when I would, and I didn't do a lot of it because I'm working on Moon's piece, which I'm way behind on everyone I'm doing it. But we're looking at the manuscript and doing a quick search and seeing where I could make adjustments. It really made the reading tighter.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? It made sentences tighter. It made dialogue better. And so I don't know. That's a great response, I think, to that question. Most supportive person in your life today?
Hmm. Probably my mom. Yeah, she's always encouraging me and listening to me rant about stuff with publishing, querying, or whatever. She's always excited for me when I get a good a request or whatever. So
Well, and I will tell you, in the trenches with you, if you need some motivation, you hop in my emails and I'll try to prop you back up from
okay, thanks.
those tough days. Have you considered writing to a younger audience?
So I definitely have. Some of my first attempts at writing books were like young adult. I've never tried middle grade or picture books or anything younger than young adult. But I would definitely be open to it. I've had a lot of ideas for young adult romance or young adult contemporary novels.
Yeah.
So I'm open to it, and if one of those ideas like really sticks out and catches me, then I will definitely do it. But for whatever reason, those ideas haven't been the ones that have stuck.
That's okay. Maybe someday. And I'll just
Yeah.
say, because I told you when I was on with you, I did a lot of
Mhm.
middle grade reading the last few months to kind of get that voice to go down. There are some really sweet, like romance stories in the middle grade that are so, like, I don't have a better word than sweet. Like, they're cute.
Yeah.
There's nothing, I mean, even YA, you can have a little bit of like, oh, something might happen off the page. But like, middle grade is truly none of that. It's just all happily ever after and like first love and like, ugh, it just, I love it. It's like Hallmark for little.
Yes.
Um, so what is your sign? I love this question.
Uh, I I always almost forget. I'm a Libra.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I'm not super into that, so I
Yeah,
forget.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
get asked it enough that I know it.
yeah, yeah. Because yeah, the people want to know.
Yes.
Least favorite food that was at Thankful Day dinner.
Oh,
That's an interesting question for Thanksgiving. Yeah, what was your
that
least
is.
favorite
Yeah.
thing? Love that.
I love potatoes, so I love mashed potatoes. That's like all that's like year round one of my favorite foods.
Same. So what's your least favorite?
I don't like cranberry sauce.
Oh, okay. I'm not a fan of like out of the can cranberry. Like that's a no go for me. But
Yeah, that for sure, but I don't really like any of it. I don't know. It's never been the thing.
too tart, too tart.
Mhm.
Since you went to school for the writing thing, what advice would you give to authors who didn't? Love that question. Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I liked about studying writing in school was that it forced me to write. So, I mean, that you can do that in school or out of school, but when I had deadlines and things and assignments due and critiques due and things like that, it really forced me to be in that world. So that would be, I think, probably my biggest advice. And I mean, obviously, you're doing it because you're here.
Yeah.
um, but really, just like immerse yourself in that world and make yourself write,
Yeah,
which is hard sometimes. But
100%. Well, and since we're about to finish the month of all the words, any feels on NaNoWriMo?
um, I never do NaNoWriMo. Well, I messed up saying that, but I never do it.
Yeah.
Um, because as I just said that, like, make yourself right. Like, I don't like having the external pressure, I think. Um, I'd rather it come like internally, I guess, the pressure to write. Um, so I don't know. I've never really, I've tried it several times and I've never been able to do it.
Yeah. Just Eva asks, are you always early, always on time, or always late?
So this is a funny question because it depends on where I'm going. Um, like I've had this discussion with people. Like if I'm going to work, for example, I am like exactly on time or a few minutes late because I don't know. But if I'm going somewhere fun or to like out to dinner with friends or a concert, whatever, I'm like way too early. So
Interesting. So it's
yeah.
the level of like where you want to be, maybe?
I think so. I haven't been able to figure it out. I don't know why that's how it works, but I'm not sure why.
I love this question, and it dovetails nicely with Richard's question, which is next, which is what is your biggest submission pet peeve?
So for poetry, you're only supposed to submit 4 poems at per like submission period. And it's a big pet peeve when they submit more than that, when anyone does. And it's frustrating because I usually won't even look at like the 5th or 6th poem because we don't have room for it. You're breaking the guidelines. But in the back of my head, it always bothers me. I'm like, what if that was the poem? Like, what if that's the poem? And so that's a big pet peeve because it makes it harder for me, but then it also potentially makes it harder on the author because they could have their most amazing poem of the bunch could have been the 7th poem and I would have never gotten to it. So
Hearing your answer, that warms my heart only because, again, the professor in me is read the syllabus, follow the directions. But yes, yeah, because for me, for CGL, same thing. If someone sends me something that's too long for us outside of our submission guidelines, I don't even open it. And that's the professor in me, right? I just email back, sorry, didn't meet our guidelines. And I don't even look because for that very reason, because I am not about to read it and go, this is amazing. I'm going to break the rules for this person one time. And then
yeah.
heretofore, everybody breaks the rules.
Well,
So
you can't start doing that
yeah,
for one like the one off and then you're not following your own guidelines.
right. It's
Um
tough. And I know
yeah.
writers don't get it. They get upset, like, well, why didn't, and it's like,
And like it makes I always say the guidelines are there to give you the best chance of being accepted. Like yes, it all helps us too. And we do, I mean, and we're a smaller journal, but we still get hundreds of
yeah,
submissions every reading period. I usually get at least 100 poems that I'm sifting through to figure out 15 that are going to be in the journal.
right.
So it sets you up to have a much better chance of getting in if you just follow the guidelines, which I know is hard as the person on the submitting end. Like, trust me, I've been there. But
I know. Richard Holiday asks, is there any font choice that would be an automatic rejection for a submission? What formatting sins are unforgivable? Good question.
yeah, that is a good question. I don't think font choices would be an automatic rejection unless it was like a really weird font that isn't on everybody's computer and I couldn't change it and it showed up as weird characters.
Like wingbats or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that would. um, but yeah, I mean, we prefer. I think we have on our website. We prefer Times New Romans or Helvetica. I think is what we have listed. But as long as it's readable and it's a font that will show up on my computer if you submitted from a Mac or something like that,
Yeah.
um, I really don't mind it. And then as far as like formatting problems or what would be unforgivable, honestly, nothing is like straight up unforgivable, but I would say if you don't have your name somewhere on your submission, it just makes it hard to accept you. So
Yeah.
please put your name on the first page. Otherwise, I'm sending our executive editor, Nicole, I'm sending her a list and I'm like,
Yeah.
this title by question mark. And if we can't figure it out, then that's again not giving you your best chance.
Maggie, Penumbra Mine, MM Ward asks, poetry is often considered purple, but it can have profound messages and meaning. How do you sort the two for the journal or podcast, or do you just leave it open to the reader?
I would say a lot of it is kind of left open to the reader. If we talk with the author, which is what we might end up doing like on the podcast or something like that, um, then the author obviously will say a bit more about what the poem is about and all of that, and that can lend some meaning and kind of decipher that. But a lot of it is really like the subjectivity and perception of the reader.
Yeah, I love that. Adam Stevenson, who has a lovely blog, asks, question, what do you think of the romance tropes in other types of fiction? For example, Harry Potter, Hunger Games, etc., etc. So thoughts on that?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I just like romance, period. So when it's in another genre, I like it. um, the funny thing though is when it's in other genres, they don't necessarily have to follow like romance conventions. So, sometimes it can be frustrating as a romance reader to not have that happily ever after or whatever, because I'm conditioned to expect that from reading so many romance books. But I definitely think they can work. I will say I don't personally like love triangles. So, and that seems to be the way that romance often pops up in non
Especially in fantasy.
books.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think both of the books that were mentioned have love triangles. So
They definitely do.
so
It's definitely
I
for
don't
YA
know about
fantasy.
that, but
Yeah, for YA fantasy, I feel like it's very popular to have like the
yeah.
the two options and which way will they go, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
me and our fiction editor Amber both do not like love triangles. I don't think she'd outright reject you if you had a story with the love triangle, but
Yes.
our
Yeah.
preferences are no love triangles.
And I'm just, before I get back to Adam's question, I'm going to throw Portia Simmons' comment up here because, again, the professor in me loves everything about this. It is so important to follow submission guidelines down to the preferred font type. Ding, ding, ding. One of the many, many reasons I love thee. Love triangles, burn it with fire. Yes, Rachel, I
Yeah.
am here for that energy. Adam Stevenson says, question, I love this. What song do you use to get other songs out of your head, and why is it Taylor Swift?
I don't know. I mean, Taylor Swift is a good option, like any song, to get other songs out of my head. But I also don't mind having certain songs stuck in my head. So there's that too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Things as it's unfair to those who did obey the rules. Yes, thank you. Read the standing orders, read them and understand them. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, Richard. I'm here for
you guys
all.
get it.
Yes, they totally get it. Guilty of being too wordy. Also, Maggie, same. I This one was what's brevity. Yeah, yeah, same. I'm gonna get back to a craft question. So tell me, what would you say is your writing kryptonite?
So I I guess I have a theme here after going with the filler words. Like another thing that I struggle with word wise is adverbs.
Mm,
Um, and I know that like the famous advice from Hemingway is to like remove all adverbs. And I don't adhere to that. I don't think that's necessarily like the standard to go by. But I definitely write with a lot of adverbs. I just said like definitely or decidedly. Those are the ones I end up getting hung up on a lot, rather than like roughly or quickly,
mhm.
those type of things. So I struggle with that, and I struggle with it because some of those like decidedly, definitely can add to like voice,
Yeah,
um, whereas roughly or quickly doesn't.
yeah.
And there's better ways to describe. So finding that balance is hard for me, and I would say that's probably my kryptonite.
I like that answer. Adam Stevenson said, mine is the DuckTales theme. I have questions about this, Adam. First of all, I have not seen that show in a good 25, 30 years at least. So I couldn't tell you what the DuckTales theme is, but I will be YouTubing that as soon as we finish this lovely show today. Gary says, aren't all rom-coms about love triangles? No, Gary, half of them are about hookers with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
So Pretty Woman, I can list several, but no, there are lots of great romance tropes. This is a kind of a craft question. Have you read Romancing the Beat? Any feelings on
I
that?
have not. I've not read that, no.
I did this summer. Don't ask Me why? Oh, I actually do. Actually, Tamara Woods, I think, did a craft
Oh,
blog on
okay.
it. And I read the book to watch it and participate. Now that I think about what I was doing, there was a purpose. But it was pretty good. And I'm a romance reader in like the holiday time, but I'm
Mhm.
not a year round, so I wouldn't say I know a lot about the tropes. But that book was really great as a beginner to kind of go, oh, there are lots of like tropes here and ways to subvert it, and how
Yeah.
important the beats are to like nailing the vibe, especially for the sweet ones that are supposed to end happily ever after. There's like a very specific like way to get there. So
Mhm.
Google Chrome, the distraction portal, Richard Holiday, I believe that. Maggie asks, what trope or theme always gets a hard no? Any abuse, self-harm, things like that?
Um, I feel like again nothing would necessarily be an automatic no. It would really depend on how it's presented and if it's, I mean, if it's getting too into details that we don't feel like is necessary. But sometimes those can be used to have a really like triumphant story or for like a nonfiction memoir type story for people who have gone through those things. So none of it would necessarily be a hard no, but we would definitely tread carefully, I guess, as far as if it's necessary or when it's too much. And if we really loved something, we would always talk to the author about it too. We are always very in favor of communicating
Yeah.
with with authors if we have questions or potential edits, things like that.
Yeah. I am very fascinated. I did not know, Portia, that there was a remake of the DuckTales theme song, so I will be checking that out. Are we talking about like a sampling of the chorus that like ended up in a song, or like a full-on remake of the song? I have questions. Richard Holiday, of course, Richard. Question: 50 Shades of Grey, yay or nay? Richard
For,
hates it. Richard
for
hates
me
it.
personally, nay.
There you go.
Yeah, not my type of
Yeah,
romance.
me either. Neither is it Richards.
Yeah,
He studied literature and over in the UK. It was a book he had to read for school. He has feelings.
interesting.
Yeah, he
I've
has
not
feelings.
heard of that being like a required reading. That's interesting.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Richard, but I think you had to read it for a class or something. Right? There was a reason you read it, and it was not like chosen.
Not like wanting to read it.
No, and like knowing Richard, I'm 100% positive that was not the choice of the book. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Yes, it was Tamara's channel, Romancing the Beat. Yes, Tamara does these really cool. Are you familiar with Tamara Woods? Have you caught any of her
No, I
videos?
don't think so.
Really great author tuber. You should check her out. She does
I
these great writing workshops about craft books. So her and some fellow author tubers will pick a craft book, read it together, and then do a live stream where they talk about it with the audience, kind of like a book club. And everybody sort of tosses like what worked for them, what didn't. And so anyway, it's a really cool idea for a show, and it's one that I get sucked into every time she's doing it. So
yeah.
Adam Stevenson says, thanks in part. Oh, you've got Sweet Caroline stuck in my head all weekend. Well, there you go. Do you think Mills and Boon books with their associated formula make romance accessible to the masses, or does it cheapen the genre? Richard Holiday.
I feel like they're different, if that makes sense. Like Mills and Boone or Harlequin or whatever.
Mhm.
I do think they make it more accessible. They do rely heavily on tropes. And sometimes, could be argued that they're not as creative or not as high quality, whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that they make it more available to the masses. And I think that they're just a different kind of romance book. Like that, if I'm in a mood for that kind of book, then that will serve its purpose. But if I want a more literary, um, even like a rom-com or something that's a bit more mainstream and not one of those category romances,
Yeah.
then that serves a different purpose, if that makes sense. So I don't really think they cheapen the genre. I think they have their own
There's space within it.
purposes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, that makes perfect sense. Portia Sim. Oh, okay. Postmodern Jukebox did an entire cover, and it's glorious. I love you
That
so much.
sounds interesting.
Doesn't it? I'm going to be looking that up as soon as we're done. And Portia, apologies for missing your stream on Wednesday this week. As I said at the beginning of the stream, my family came, overstayed, and there was just no existing outside of them for the week. Richard Holiday says, I had to read Twilight. Oh, this was it. Had to read Twilight for class, which was worse. So I threw in a pre-owned copy of 50 Shades as a thought in for a penny. Agreed. The only reason, and Richard and I have talked about this, I even read 50 Shades was having read Twilight, didn't love them. Because I didn't love, I don't know. It was like, that does not feel like how love should be. Or for like young girl. I don't think young girl. Anyway, lots of issues.
Yeah.
So I too read 50 Shades, the first book, because I was curious, right? I was like, wait a minute, fan fiction is becoming like, at the time, a New York Times bestseller. I was like, give me a break.
Right.
And then I read it and I went, oh, okay. So yeah, I learned a lot from that series. Okay, so how has podcasting or the literary journal changed your writing process?
Yeah, so I think that I don't know about how it's affected my writing process as much. I mean, I think anytime I get to discuss different elements of writing with different people who come from different backgrounds and different ideas and write differently than me, write different genres, have different writing processes, that all is really like mind opening and gives me new ideas and things to try. So I think it always kind of broadens my perspective and gives me new ways to try out writing, to break my writer's block or whatever it might be. So I think that is definitely how the journal and the podcast have helped.
I love that answer. I think that's 100% true. Haley just got 50 Shades of Thrift Shop because I was so curious. It's definitely interesting. It is. It is. And Haley, when you finish it, reach out to me. Let's discuss it behind the scenes. I have some feels. And Richard also got his copy used and wanted people to know it was well enjoyed. It's fine. Okay. However, to your point, one of the things that I always try to tell folks, I think that the best thing for me when I joined my Writers Guild a long, long time ago, when I go back and read that graveyard of books that I haven't finished, when I see them getting better, what I noticed the big change was, because I didn't go to school for writing. That wasn't my path. I did it just for fun and kind of on the side. When I started reading other writers' work, and not published work, but like unpublished work, and then they were looking for feedback on it, so like beta reading or critique partnering, I learned so much about myself in that process. Like reading other people's work taught me stuff that I needed to work on, that or thought like, hey, that's kind of a cool way to do dialogue, or just stuff like that, that I think for people in your position who are literally taking hundreds of submissions, during a certain period, how could you not be inspired from seeing the way someone else turns a phrase or does something differently that you think, oh yeah, that's really cool. So I would tell people, get out there and CP for people, beta read for people. You don't have to have a literary journal to have that experience of like learning from other writers that aren't yet published, learning from each other's mistakes and leveling up that way.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going to do this while we were on that topic, although I'm going to keep asking questions. If anyone in the audience is looking for a beta reader or critique partner, this is the match-up moment. So I'm going to tell the comment section to chill out for just a little bit on our questions. We're going to do only beta read and critique partner matchups. This is what it should look like. I want you to tell me whether you're looking for a beta or a CP. I want you to lay out what category, what is your genre, what is the word count, and when do you need it by? And then please connect with one another. Everyone should be wrenched, so you can leave email addresses and things in the comments. And I'm going to give you about 4 to 5 minutes to do that with one another while Addey and I talk about something else. I'm going to leave the example up. So Addey, tell me this. What is the best money that you have spent as a writer?
Yeah, so I really struggled when I first started querying. I thought I had a really good query letter. I think everyone probably thinks they do when they first start. But like I said, I had better luck with like pitch events, and like my really short 2-sentence log line. I somehow did that okay, even though that's really hard to do. But like
Very hard.
query letter where I had more room, I really struggled with it. So I ended up actually like paying for a few query letter critiques just because I felt super stuck. Like I had run it by my writing friends and I still felt like something was off and I needed like more advice. So I ended up doing a couple different critiques. One of them wasn't as helpful and it was through Fiverr. But then the other one that I did was through Manuscript Academy.
Okay.
If you're familiar with them. I'm not a member or anything, so like I'm not I don't work for them. I'm not promoting them or anything, but I did their manuscript, or not manuscript, query letter critique. And that was super, super helpful. It was with an actual literary agent. They have a couple options. You can do like a live one or one where they get back to you later with like written notes. And I did that option rather than live. And that was super helpful. And I would definitely recommend it if you're feeling stuck with your query letter. I feel like it gave me so much to go off of. So it really gave me a new direction to go with my query letter. And I feel like it's much improved since then. So now I'm on like, I don't know, version 5 of my query letter, and I feel like it's a lot better. I feel like
Yeah.
it's a version.
No, I think that's a really great tip. I have heard of them. I haven't dipped my toe in. I will probably in the spring because you're not the first that's actually mentioned that. And all of them say the same thing, like, this is not sponsored. Like, just
Yeah.
works for me. Yeah, and anyone in chat, I'm about to turn off the beta read critique because I'm not seeing people connect, and that's fine. This just throwing it out there if you need it. But we'll get back to asking us questions. But I did want to throw this out. If you are on YouTube and looking for something similar to the Manuscript Academy, Morgan Hazelwood, I think I'm saying her last name correctly, has a show that she's doing live with an industry professional who is doing query critiques. So live, they have people send them their query. They go over it during the live stream and give you feedback, and we'll even send you notes after the fact. So if you're looking for something that and you can't afford it, because I know sometimes cost is the barrier, check out Morgan's channel. It is 100% free to hit subscribe and the notification bell. So with that, let me ask you this. What does literary success look like to you?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily have like any, I don't know, like monetary or number of sales or number of followers or anything like that. Like that's not to me what defines success for me personally. Um, I I just really want to be able to keep doing what I love. So like I would love to be able to publish this book and then keep writing books or keep working with the journal, keep publishing new authors that way. So I love writing and I love reading and I love publishing and just being able to continue to do that, even if I'm not on the New York Times bestseller list or making millions of dollars, which who makes that these days from writing anyway?
Aha, in publishing?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, my view of success would just be continuing to do what I love. So
Let me ask you one that I normally don't ask, but I'm just going to throw it out there and see because I think it's a fun question. What's the wildest dream? What's your wildest publishing dream? The thing that you almost don't let yourself think about. What would that be?
yeah, I mean, I would love to have I would love to have like a book turned into a movie. Don't know how
Yeah,
realistic that. I think that's everybody's dream, but also
yeah,
like on a smaller scale, like I just really want to see my book one of my books someday in a bookstore.
yeah.
Like I
Totally.
would just love that. Like there's a couple romance writers who are local here, and I love being able to go into the bookstore and buy their book that they went in and signed because
Yep,
they could just go in and sign
yep,
books because
yep.
they live here, and I'm like that would just be amazing.
Yes, totally, totally. I agree 100%. I'm going to real quick throw this up on screen because this is very exciting. Nikki won Nano last night. Congratulations, Nikki. I knew
Yay!
you could do it. I loved it. All those pop-up streams paid off. Congratulations. So proud of you. Thank you for popping in to say hello to us. We love spending time with you. So tell me this, what about writer's block? Do you think it's a thing? Do you not think it's a thing? What's your feeling?
Yeah, so I sort of think it's a thing, but sort of don't, which isn't much of an answer. But I feel like I I do think obviously we all have times where we can't write or like we just for whatever reason cannot get the words on the page. I think that 100% happens. I feel like sometimes how writer's block is talked about though, it's like it's this thing that's completely beyond your control, like it's its own beast, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's where I kind of don't agree. I think that it's painful sometimes, and you have to just like force yourself to write. But I don't think writer's block controls you as a writer. I think you
No.
have it around it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So yes and no.
That's fine. There are no wrong answers here. It's just like a Reese's. There's no wrong way to eat one.
Yeah.
Richard Holiday says, I'd love to see a book of mine in an actual bookshop. Maybe even surreptitiously sign a copy for a lucky reader. All right, folks, in my comment section, I'm going to ask you all that question. So let me know, what is your wildest publishing dream? Put it in the comments for me. I'm going to throw it up on screen while I'm chatting with Addie. What genre would you love to write in that might surprise your audiences?
Yeah. So, well, I would really love to write like a gothic novel, um, which is kind of the opposite of like the sweet happily ever after romance type of thing. So I think that might be surprising, but I really like the kind of like dark, moody, like spooky atmosphere with like a gothic novel. So I would love to do something like that. Um, I mean, I would totally do it if I could come up with an idea for that.
That's quite a change from like the sweet romance. So I can,
I know.
yeah,
Yeah.
like a
So
Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil kind of gothic, or like what kind of, like, give me an idea of like, or like, I'm assuming not Anne Rice, like not more that.
no,
Okay.
not really that. I mean, I guess I think of like classic gothic novels even.
Mhm.
I can't think of like any specific one off the top of my head, but you
No.
know, like there's a big dark manor and it's always cloudy and rainy and there's something spooky
Yeah.
happening and the main character can't figure it out. And I'm sure there'd be a romance in there because I couldn't do without a romance, but
So like Wuthering Heights maybe, or
yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Dorian Gray or Jane Eyre, or one of those that has like a ooh spooky. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess not like hardcore gothic, I guess, but
Yeah.
definitely darker and spookier than what I would typically write.
For sure. Nikki, I'm glad everyone's giving you the love. That's a huge accomplishment. I'm so proud of you. Congratulations. Margaret Pinard, my other favorite historical fiction author, has just popped in. Welcome, Margaret. We're talking to Addie. You two have lots of the things in common, so I'll have to make sure you two connect. Shannon says, my wildest dream would be selling thousands of copies of my books. Well, we're going to have to just make that happen. So I'm not quite sure how, but I'm going to help you get there. Thank you, Sarah. Make sure you hit that like button. Thank you so much. I appreciate you for throwing that out there. Let's see here. Maggie says, the wildest dream, to be sitting on a plan and have the actor or actress I imagined as a character recognize me and say they liked my book and they know this producer. That's a pretty amazing wild dream. I'm here for that one. Richard says, hang in there, Shannon. You'll achieve that one book at a time. Love that one. I do too. Adam Stevenson says, to write a great British novel like Great Expectations or Wuthering Heights that become timeless and outlives me and my 100 years. That is not a bad thing. Gary Thomas, The Black Widow. I love it. Tiffany, my fellow St. Louis, and good to see you. And Margaret says, oh, yes, fun. I'll be watching the replay. Thank you, Margaret. I appreciate you, but yes, you two should connect because you write similar stuff and you both have a similar vibe. So you would enjoy one another, I believe. All right, so let me pop down and ask you a couple of my live chat questions that I had to finish up with. And folks, we are reaching the last 20 minutes, so get your questions in there before we wrap things up. So I wanted to know, what sort of research do you do? Because you have historical elements in your last story. So what does the research look like, and how much of it do you do before even beginning the book?
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a good amount of research involved. Because I love historical fiction so much and I read a good amount of it, like, you know, certain surface level things I'm pretty familiar with, you know, certain time periods and colloquialisms and things like that anyway.
Yeah.
But I definitely had to do a lot of research, and I'm a pantser, so there wasn't a whole lot beforehand. It was mainly as I was going and got to a spot where I was like, I need some real concrete details here
Yeah.
about you know, the history of this building or whatever it might be. So a lot of it is done as I'm going along rather than beforehand. Um, since this particular book too that I'm currently creating was based in Colorado, I know a decent amount of like the history of Colorado too, so that helped a lot. If it was somewhere in a different state or different country that I'm not as familiar with, or a time period that I wasn't as familiar with, that would have been a whole other story.
Okay.
But
That's interesting. I love that. Nicole says, publish my trilogy and have it be a movie. Love that. Small dream to have others who write Western adjacent novels understand there are more than two kinds of cows. Dare to
Like
dream,
it.
Maggie. Maggie has a farm in Colorado, and I'm obsessed with her bees because she makes her own honey, as well as her goats. She has goats that I am like, I need a baby
That's
goat in life.
exciting.
And my husband keeps saying, no, it won't work in our condo. And I keep saying, yes, it will, Ricky. Dare to dream. I love this from Tiffany says, I would love to write a historical or a memoir of my great grandmother. I love that. Please write it so I can read it. Yes, an ambitious goal indeed. Haley says, I'll be looking for critique partners probably come February, then got to start querying. So right now, the wildest dream is just to have people want it. And then, of course, to have international fame. Well, naturally. The only thing would have been better if you said, and of course, world peace. But I do think, Haley, if you are looking for critique partners come February, that section that I do with critique partners and beta readers is a feature of all of my live streams. So every live stream I have, there's a section where we do that and we break off and folks can pair up. So we'll find you somebody. Maggie says the cringe is so real. Yeah, I can't even imagine. Wild dream Barrett makes come true being asked, seriously, y'all the best feeling. Margaret.
Mhm.
I love you. Okay, so let me ask this: what has been your most effective form of marketing for both Borrowed Solace and your own personal brand?
Sure. So for Borrowed Solace, there's a website. Now I'm gonna forget what it's called. I think it's called Authors Right.
Okay.
I might be thinking of the wrong thing. But they're a website and they have like a classifieds ad
Okay.
page, and we have found that to be super super helpful. Like when we're looking for calls for submissions. And let me double check what the name is so that I'm saying the right thing.
Yeah.
But that's been really helpful. Like we will have like no submissions or very few, and then once we get that classified ad and people become more aware, like it's like a job. It's not a job board, but it's sort of like that, but for writers, and they have like open calls for submissions and agents and all of that. And it's been really helpful. So it's actually called New Pages. I was way off, but that's
Okay.
what it's called.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So
Yeah.
that was the best way to get the word out that, hey, we've got a literary journal and we're looking for you, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great place if you're looking to submit to literary journals to look for like open calls for submissions too. So there's that side of it as well. That's not what we use it for, but it would be really helpful for that.
Yeah.
So New Pages is a big recommendation there. And then for like personally for building my author brand and getting the word out, I think writing on Medium has really been good for that, because it allows me to kind of write about different topics that I may not otherwise connect with people on.
Yep.
Like writing about cats or whatever it might
Absolutely.
be. So that's been really good for that as well, and getting followers there and community there.
For sure. Speaking of Medium, I know there have been I haven't written on Medium myself. I know there have been some changes. Feelings on the changes? Do you have any?
Yeah, so it's a little like I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the changes. The biggest one is that like to be a new writer on Medium, you have to start earning money, you have to have so many followers. I think it's 100, which is kind of hard for people when they're just starting out.
Yeah.
So definitely when I started, one of the big draws was that you could start earning right away. So I think that is a negative for writers, but I kind of understand why Medium went that route.
Sure.
So it's kind of tricky, and I have over 100 followers, so that's not necessarily going to affect me. So I feel like I'm not the best person to speak to that part at least. But they're definitely making changes, and time will tell if it's for the better or not.
Yeah, I mean, I love author branding, love talking about it, thinking about it. It's like my thing. But my thought on it is this: if you've been out there building a platform and you think that Medium is a spot for you, for my folks here on YouTube, it's just the same as getting those first 100 subscribers. It's tough, but if you already have a platform, it's a lot easier to hit that number because you can drive people to it. Part of my first 100 subscribers on YouTube was my Twitter because I have 16,000 over there. So it made it a lot faster to get to 100. Now, it didn't get all 16,000 over here, and I'm still salty about it. I'll be going to Twitter later and griping about it in a very long thread. But if you have a platform, it's easier to point, right, to another one. And I get and I agree with you that I think they have to make some changes. They have to keep evolving. You know what I mean? To stay
Right. And I will say too,
and 100's better than 1,000. Do you know what I mean?
It's not an unattainable goal.
Yeah.
And I will say, I think I have 250-ish followers now. And I started writing in May 2020. So it, on the one hand, that's a long time. On the other hand, it's not, to really build that many followers. So, and I mean, I probably got to 100 by the end of 2020 or beginning of 2021. So if you put the time in, I think it's definitely attainable to get that many followers.
Sure. Adam started his blog on Medium and switched it to WordPress. Adam, I'd be curious why, if you want to tell us. Adam also has a question for you. When you write characters, do you think of actors who might play them in like the Hallmark movie? And have you ever done a slight self-insert? Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, those are good questions. I definitely think I don't necessarily have a like particular actor in mind, but I'll have like, as I'm writing, a couple people in my head like playing out the characters as they go through different scenes or whatever. And especially like, obviously, I think it's a lot of romance writers, their dream would be to have a Hallmark movie. So I would love that. And so there's always actors on there that I'm like, they would be really good to play so and so.
Yeah.
So I do that. What was the second question? I forgot already.
No, that's okay. The second question was, have you ever done a slight self-insert? Which I love the slight, because it's sort of like, was it an accidental self-insert?
I definitely think that my main character, at least in this book, my current book is a little bit of a self-insert, although it wasn't necessarily intentional, but just writing from her point of view, definitely I'm inserted a little bit.
Yeah. I loved this. I have to read this one out loud because the biggest self-own is unknowing self-insert, said an author who knows. I know. I feel that. Margaret said, I started on Medium. I don't even remember the name. Maybe I started on something, don't remember the name, similar to Medium, I guess. But now on Patreon with half public, half patron posts works for me. Okay. Listen, I'm all about monetizing because, as we've discussed, writing isn't a place to get rich. So you need to have,
unfortunately,
alternate incomes to figure that out. Twitter is being sketchy today. I don't know who I'm subbed, and it doesn't know either. Oh, that's fun. That happens to me when I get reported, for what it's worth, Sarah. If someone's reported a tweet, sometimes for a day they'll hold your subscriber, your followers and stuff hostage, the numbers hostage while they investigate. And usually it's not a thing. I haven't tweeted much lately, so it's definitely not that. On the advice of Richard Holiday, and I was only allowed at the time to upload so many blogs per month, and a time when the words could not be contained. Oh, I get it. Okay, I get it. So you were wanting more freedom, more space. LOL, I love you, Sarah. I do love you, Sarah. I would have been me that reported you, but it's, come sit by me, girl. What is your favorite underappreciated novel and author?
Ooh. I really like Laura France. She's a historical romance writer. And I feel like no one knows about her. So
Margaret would, if anybody would, but I don't.
Yeah, I really like her novels. So I don't know if there's like a particular novel. She's the kind of person that like I found she only has one series and then the rest are standalone books. And I found the series at the library and read them all and then had to like go back and read all of her backlist. So not necessarily one particular novel, but as an author, I think she's kind of underappreciated and not recognized very often.
That's a great answer. I love that. Haley says, I have to head off to get a bite to eat before my live stream at 1. I'll see you at 1, Haley. But this was so fun and interesting. I've subscribed to the newsletter. Thank you for that, Haley.
Thank you.
Great questions. Appreciate you, Haley. And I will see you probably 1:15, 1:20. Once we get done backstage, I'll be heading over there to say hello. My last question for you before I give you a chance to kind of bid everyone adieu and do a little outro is my favorite question for all these interviews, especially someone with a literary journal. What is the most, in your opinion, unethical practice in publishing.
Ooh, unethical. I mean, I don't really like how in many ways it's like a who you know kind of thing to get your foot in the door. Um, on the one hand, I understand that, and that's great if you know people, but if you don't, that really blocks out a lot of people from getting into the publishing industry. So, and I think that happens with literary journals too. So I would say I don't know if that's like straight up unethical, but it's something I wish would
Change.
change and not be as much of a prerequisite to getting your foot in the door with all of these publishers. So
Fair. Margaret Pinard, as I guessed, I think has it. Is it this Laura Franz? Frantz?
Let me double check. I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
that's how you spell her name. Yes.
So if so, then
I'm
there's the
guessing that's it.
Okay, cool. Portia Simmons says, had to step away and come back to fainting goats. My husband said I'm dramatic like one. Portia, Ricky would say the exact same thing as your husband would say about me, and you know that's true. Awesome response, Maggie. Yes, I agree. I agree as well. I liked that answer. So here's what I'm going to do. I have so loved our time together. I'm going to switch over and give you a full screen so you can let everyone know whatever you want them to know. This is your time to sign off, give everybody your last word. Take it away, Addey Vaters. This has been lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed being here and getting all the questions. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, so I guess kind of parting words. Like we mentioned earlier, Borrowed Solace is opening back up for submissions on December 3rd. So that's this coming Friday. So we would love if you would submit. We'd love to see what you are working on. And it's unthemed, so there's no theme for this coming edition that we're opening submissions for. So you can send us whatever, and we would be really excited to see it. I will also plug too that the podcast that Barrett's on, we're gonna have that go live on December 14th. So keep an eye out for that too. But yeah, I've really enjoyed being here. You know where to find me. AddeyVaters.com, BorrowedSolace.com, Addey Vaters everywhere, Borrowed Solace everywhere. But thank you so much for having me.
This was so lovely. And yes, December 14th, whenever you let me know, I will plug it to all of the places and all of the things. Everyone, all of the links for Addey can be found in the description box below. So please check out all of her places and all of the things. And please, please, please submit. I cannot wait for one of you to be reaching out to me saying, hey, can you do a community post to plug the latest Borrowed Solace because they chose my piece? That's what I want to be hearing from everybody. So get out there, make those connections, submit, and do the thing so I can cheer you on. I love each and every one of you. I think this is for you. It's all in big letters. Laura Franz is going to Scotland with her readers next year. What?
I saw that.
Okay.
That made me so excited. And then I was like, oh, I don't know if I can go, but I would love to.
So it's now Margaret's wildest dream to escort readers to my own settings. Listen, it makes perfect sense. I thank you, Richard and Adam Stevenson, Shannon, Rachel Terry was here, Maggie, Just Eva, Margaret Pinard. Adam Stevenson had so many great questions. Portia Simmons, you know you're my heart. Sarah Wordsmith, Sarah writes, y'all should be checking out her vlogs, crack me up every time. Haley writes, thanks for coming. She is live at 1 o'clock. Be sure and check out Devin Cutting's playlist. I will add it to the description box below. It has all of the live writing sprints for everyone throughout the rest of Nano, so be sure and check that out if you're looking for it. Where I Live, awesome. Yes, Adam Stevenson, in your home, in your backyard of Edinburgh. So all of you, I love you and appreciate you. Please stay healthy and well. Addey and I are wishing you a great rest of your weekend and a successful week ahead. And take it easy, friends. We'll see you soon.